Okay. So first of all, just welcome to the Amesbury monthly poetry reading series. I'm really excited. This is our first one. Um, the series and the Amesbury Poet Laureate program is sponsored by the Amesbury Cultural Council, as well as the John Greenleaf Whittier Home and Museum. Our programs are free and open to the public, and as nonprofits, we welcome donations. I will put a link in the chat, and that will take you to the Whittier Home Support Us page. And thank you in advance for your consideration. I also wanted to say that the Poet Laureate Support Committee is looking for volunteers. If you're local to Amesbury, you don't actually have to live in Amesbury, but if you're close, that's great. We're looking for people who are interested in supporting poets, poetry, and literary citizenship in our community. And if you're interested, please let me know in the chat. Our reading will be followed by a question and answer session with Carolyn, a brief intermission, and then an open mic. And if you are interested in reading, please do drop a comment in the chat. So tonight it gives me great pleasure to say that our featured poet is Carolyn Oliver. Carolyn is the author of The Alcestis Machine, which is forthcoming this fall from Acre Books. And she's also the author of 2022's Inside the Storm, I Want to Touch the Tremble, which was published by the University of Utah Press and selected for the Aga Shahid Ali Prize by Matthew Oldsman. Her most recent chapbook is Night Ocean, published by Seven Kitchens Press in 2023. And she is also a 2023-2024 Artist in Residence at Mount Auburn Cemetery. You can find out more about Carolyn and her work, including how to order her books, online at carolynoliver.net. And I will drop that link in the comments as well. On a personal note, I met Carolyn through our writing group, Fabrica Poetica, which my cousin, Julie Phillips Brown, started during the pandemic. The poems that Carolyn shared with the Fab Poets, her feedback, her support, they all just never failed to blow me away. And she truly is one of my favorite poets, which is why I'm so glad that she's here tonight. Please help me welcome Carolyn.
Thank you.
Yay!
That was so kind. Thank you. Thank you very much. And by the way, Lisa is a wonderful poet herself, and this is her book, Guest People, which you should all consider ordering because it is fantastic.
Oh.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you too to the Whittier Home and to the Amesbury Poet Laureate Reading Series. Or the monthly Poet Laureate Reading Series?
It's the Amesbury Monthly Poetry Reading Series. If anybody has suggestions for the name, please let us know. It's kind of a mouthful, but yeah.
I am truly thrilled to be
here. She's just talking.
Hello, Aunt Nancy. Yeah, I'm very, very happy to be here, and I am planning to read a smorgasbord of poems, a snack dinner of poems, if you will. From all over the place. I'm going to read poems from my first book, from my forthcoming book, from a couple of chapbooks, some new poems, some poems about the cemetery, some things I have never read to another human being before. So thank you all for being here and for bearing with me when I inevitably make some sort of misstep. Although this time I'm very happy that I have not yet A, fallen off my chair, or B, left myself on mute, both of which I have done during Zoom readings before. So fingers crossed. I'm going to start by reading about ghosts, and I'm going to end tonight's reading with cemetery poems. So when you get to, let's see, a reference to NASA, you're about a third of the way through the reading. And when there's a Patrick Stewart reference, there's only 2 poems to the end, just so you know. Okay. So the first 2 poems I'm going to read are from my forthcoming collection, The Alcestis Machine, which I think I would characterize as a book of speculative poems. Some of them are quite strange indeed. These are some of the less strange poems. This one is called Manifestation. In another life, I'm a ghost interpreter, gleaning intention from images the desirous whisper, tulips puckered in shadow, expecting daylight's long lick, quilts made of looking glass, maps from long unfolding creased greasy silver. When the ghosts pretend they don't want to be overheard, I eavesdrop. I sample the aftertastes of shame and pride, blush-warped valleys, plastic wolves. It's tricky work, like plucking lyrics from a car stereo blowing by at 90. The pay is good, but the clients, well, impatient. They want justice or lost duchesses, or assurance of their flag's heroic snap in every gale. Who wants sunburnt snow, nettle welts, contour maps of empty houses? But you. I can tell you about the pleasure of warm water coursing over my hands after I peel tonight's potatoes, and it can mean nothing else except what you remember. When you say, I'm paraphrasing, I want for you rain budding on locusts, I don't need to explain. Here the hills are always gilded and dying, and our echoes beg for higher ground. Oh, thanks. Snips. I was recently at a conference, and the reading room was so gigantic you couldn't hear any of the audience or really even see them. It was a little weird. It's like reading into the void. But lovely, very nice to be there. This is the second poem I'm going to read from the next collection, and it's called This Splenda Packet Advises Me Be the Energy, all caps, you want to attract, small caps, italicized. I have maybe an oppositional personality disorder where I really loathe being told what to do. So lately, I have been the energy of the kite-fin shark, enormous-eyed, fatty-livered slow cruiser of the mesopelagic depths, hunting the sweet edge of daylight in ever-dark, belly-glowing secret blue. Given this encouragement, though, I'm considering attracting a new kind of energy, the energy of a petrified tree, 60 feet tall and 20 million years old. The one paleobotanist just uncovered and lovingly extricated from highway dirt on Lesbos. Yes, I am now the energy of this tree that fell whole, all its tree organs still attached, this tree making the best of a volcanic eruption. I am the energy of slow hardening, of lying in wait for the right eyes, that Miocene kind of patience. And speaking of trees, I'm going to read this poem, which I have not read out loud to other human beings before, and it is long and it is one sentence. So do a little knuckle cracking, see how this goes. It's called The Trees in California. And the inciting incident is true. Scrubbing the sink stopper, I dislodge a child's tooth wedged against the plastic, and when I realize it's my son's molar, years ago lost, then lost again almost instantly, I berate myself for how I've failed to summon the discipline to overcome my loathing for this kind of housework, its squelchy refusal to stay done, how I've failed to tame by breathing deep and presently. My wayward mind, how even now I've granted my attention leave to gallivant from our fruitless crabapple to those wildflowers out west to a friend's new baby. But then Joni interrupts with blues' one skippable song, and I stop, contemplate whether a man, old or not, has ever chided himself for neglecting a nasty bit of housekeeping, conclude with near certainty, no. Then rinse the tooth, noting something animal about it, human eroded along with its enamel, leaving plain bone. Rough like the foot of a celadon bowl made by my friend in California, her California, the redwooded north where poppies are safe fire on elastic stems, their soft eyes intent, I suspect, on my friend at work. My friend I could ask, because sometimes she has cleaned other people's houses for a living, I mean, to be afforded the privilege of staying alive, if she's ever found a tooth, and if so, did she feel, too, unnerved by a vague impression of violence? But for once, I catch myself. I should not task my friend, wearied today with mourning a beloved. So instead, I tuck the tooth in my pocket, get back to scrubbing, And as I clean the toilet, Joni sings about going home, how she'll kick a sunset peach. Wrong words, I know, but don't ask me to change how I hear them, how they recall the taste of summer night dripping from the trees in California. Joni's California. My one time in LA and late to meet a friend for dinner, stalled admiring the giant gray sidewalk trees, their smooth, bare boles serenely erupting out of root-chewed concrete, as if, after planting, someone washed his hands of them, left presuming they would grow politely, not like this, as if they could never learn the ways of men or fire or permission. I'm going to switch gears over to a couple of poems that start with something like my son asks, or my son says, as my son, he talks, he's wonderful, and I love him very much. But I do have a bunch of these, so I'm going to break them into two groups. I'll read a couple now and a couple closer to the end of the reading. This one is called, My Son Asks, If We Rode the Bus to School in the Olden Days. Like a pew, his presence braced the day. He drove the route in a uniform he chose, heavy boots, work shirt, jeans gone soft with wear. Aviators on brilliant afternoons that felt chipped from ice, and in near dark Cleveland mornings too, the ones that taught us a new kind of cold. Inside, the bus was mostly wet wool warm, though not where he sat alone, folding the door open again and again as winter invited itself in. For weeks, his right hand cracked until it bled. His voice was hard, unsweet, but it was that hand that said, here is a man not to be fucked with. On his bus, cruelties great or small found no room to crouch among green vinyl seats. And for that, as much as for his unsung labor, I was grateful, tossing him a thank you when I passed. Except one afternoon, when I stumbled down the steps and called, I love you, Charlie, then ran, mortified the other kids had heard the slip. But whether they hadn't, or he shut them up, or they felt it too, I don't know. Nobody ever said. And to my shame, I never spoke those words again. My son tells me he loves me like the stars. Wonder is what I tried to save of faith, what I hold out for him to take. Inchworms and whirligigs, geodes and oyster shells, icicles and lemons and postage stamps. I wanted to give him the galaxy, since even on the coldest moon-dim nights, I can't place a single constellation, my pains to parse dimension and distance always fruitless. So we resolved to drive through Shenandoah, away from sunset's city shine. The road unwound like a strand of pitted pearls slipped over knolls and drops our headlights barely touched. We stopped to wait for our eyes to remember dark. Because he'd read the trailhead warnings, bears abroad and gorging, he scanned out, not up, scouring the hillside woods for a shadow shifting against the breeze, and meantime twitched at each new peeper's bleat. Idly I swirled his thistledowny hair, and, expecting the sea spray shock I once saw splashed across another country's night, I almost missed a film barely risen to the surface of the sky, like a scrap of cloud or mist, except for its seeming stillness. A scrap of cloud it could have been, for all the boy beside me cared, too fixed on bears and moths and surely rabid bats to be impressed by luminous mysteries. Blue giants and supernovas, binary stars devoured and devouring, pulsars and teeming nurseries. And somewhere in the arc of dust swept overhead, life, swimming perhaps in its orbit, a star, a cool red dwarf with fuel enough to burn until the heat death of the universe comes, a star that will outlive all the others. So I might have preached, but he needed sleep, and night would likely not the homeward miles. Dreaming against the window, he didn't see the bear cubs stumble off the road in time. Silver-struck eyes bewildered by the light we couldn't help but spill ahead of us. All right. And I'm going to read one poem from this chapbook, which is called Mirror Factory, which contains mostly persona poems. And this one is called Enceladus considers Cassini. Oh, thanks, Lisa. Lisa has it. Oh, and Cassini, I think, is possibly my favorite spacecraft ever. I have to think about that, but definitely one of them. Little witness, golden anglerfish, plunge and surface. You'll never take my measure. Trawl for signs of life, hurl my reflection home, swim through vapor curtains, draining me to chalk his boundary ornament, this filmy ring I can't escape. I know your exquisite instruments cannot scrape my craters smooth, or catch my oceans heave and seething hiss, nor can your innards taste the ice that's never seen my father's face. Old Saturn, child eater, I've watched you jump through his hoops, well trained. His patient maw waits while your gods arc you close. Soon, mission's end, a lick of flame snuffed out to keep me safe. There's your NASA reference too. Okay, so this poem is called Familiars, and this poem actually came out of that group that Lisa mentioned. I wrote this at the instigation of one Shiloh, and if Shiloh were here, I would say thank you, Shiloh. And it is also a persona poem, and it's about Virginia Woolf and Sylvia Townsend Warner, who is a novelist I hope everybody reads more of. And it begins with an epigraph from Sylvia Townsend Warner's diary, an entry of the 26th of January, 1942. The last light handful remaining of that tall and abundant woman. Virginia lights a cigarette and stretches her legs. Timber Creek on the winter Thames. She must go for a walk. Sinking shadows twitch and jerk like Diaghilev dancers, all angles and sacrifice. In the corner, Valentine and Vita play chess. Crimson and emerald pieces slide over a frozen board, which melts onto the floor in rivulets the dogs should lap up. Having declared herself a witch, Sylvia pours tea. A damselfly, that one, narrow and restless, no regard for place. The impulse to try on her spectacles, her iridescence. Virginia can almost hear the humming as the other woman takes notes, treble clef, bass staff. The trouble with having another writer to dinner, this mirroring of observer and observed. Assemble one's public artifice, and the performance is subject to speculation, will be recorded and played back in another register. Offer no pose, expend one's effort to resist withholding, and the exertion becomes the portrait regardless. Exhausting deciding which version of the self to offer, and how much there is to regret. The roses on her burnt velvet skirt, a disappointing burgundy, the agony of yet another lace shawl. Gale of silent pages tumbling out behind her head. The chill. How is it they are alone in the room? She must offer Sylvia a sweater, something glazed in celadon. The ash from her cigarette spreads into a murmuration, familiars in someone else's dream. Salamanders, sparrows, stones from an uncrossed river. Now my list tells me to go to the red flag here. This is my first book, which Lisa kindly mentioned. And this poem is called Saint Agnes meets a hawk. Thanks, Lisa. On the river's edge. Hawk, my lamb is lost, she says. Her voice is a piccolo the hawk could grip between two red talons. Where have you lost your lamb? The rain tastes like moss and smoke. There is nowhere I have not lost my lamb, in forests, in caves, in dwelling places. The river sediment, stirred, disturbed, remembers winter. A bird in hand is worth one bird exactly. I could be your lamb, my feathers soft as fleece. What's the use in hunting through the storm? The trees grow from their own martyrs. Hawk is too familiar. The girl does not reply, or cannot. Her hair grows and grows, enough to make a rope to the other shore, or a nest. And this is a poem that is not in any of the books, and I was thinking about it because yesterday would have been my grandmother's birthday, and this poem is called Church. I was the priest, my brother the communicant, our sister the congregation, though we called her the audience. And for the body of Christ, we chose cherry juju coins because nonpareils would have melted in our fists. We nicked the candy from Graham's stash, and Lord, they were so chewy, it's a wonder we didn't lose teeth. Not like the real host, which tasted like wet cardboard, but weighed nothing in your palm, dissolved almost before you could swallow. Though of the three of us, only I knew this, being 8, oldest, having already made my penance in the spring. How solemn our faces, how swift the game we played, not near long enough to fill the hours in the wooded shade of this strange property, church-owned, where rabbits gamboled on the gravel drive, deer delivered damp fawns in the front yard, and the elbow of the Christmas crush Mary peeked out from under a pool blue tarp all summer, the closest we came to a neighbor. Of course, Graham found us and scolded. Girls can't be priests. But that red sweetness, stolen, still sticks in my teeth. And I have one more poem that's in here, which is apparently, oh, wait, no, blue flag. Oh, yes, blue flag, which is also in memory of my grandmother. No names. Your hair's sunset smell at 8. Old lemon roses, braided packs girls make late and keep. Voicemails, black raspberries, her lace, fan-shaped, pink, crocheted, sugar maples this far south. There's no accounting for all we want to save, no names. Still, say one syllable, another, again, again. Now I'm going to, thank you, I'm going to switch to a couple of poems that have to do with my paternal grandfather. I don't know if any of you are watching that Apple documentary. It's not documentary, but the series Masters of the Air. My grandfather was a navigator on a B-17. Dead reckoning. A boy is a bomb in the wrong hands. Once they taught boys how to take flight, some to shoot, some to sight, and one to show them the way, hunched in a glass room over the long dark curves of breathless cold, exploding boys. Dead reckoning. Watch, a map, a pencil, a view, and all the boys waiting for the drop. Raised Bombay doors, our wings bleeding light. Pressed between them, my boy balances on a beam 4 feet high, afraid he'll be loosed, howling to strike the earth. No hands to hold him. This poem is called Triangulation, and it's for Lean, and also for my dad. At dinner time, my father brings me, hungry, close to the television's warm, static fur. I have just turned 5. Watch this, he says. You need to remember it. There is singing and ladders bristling against a black sky, lights beating down on people, so many people, hacking red scrawled snarls off an ashen wall. In the cold, some of them with their bare hands chisel the concrete. Dust, white as breath, falls and falls. Today, it is snowing war. I chop meat and miss my father. Far from here, he listens to opera on the radio, sifting through his own father's history. He sends me a list, cities and dates, a neat and terrible catalog. I set aside my knife and imagine my grandfather a mere radar speck, freezing soundless over the Dutch countryside as he guides his plane's belly full of bombs toward Berlin. Far below, a blue-eyed girl, savior of downed airmen, bomber of rail yards, hears boots on the stairs, goes breathless. They've found her, triangulated her position by the radio in her hands, the resistance radio she has just enough time to hide under the body of her dying father. She survives the night. But the war proves insatiable. My father's father flies again, again, again. Finally rescued, the girl is snowflake light, starving so that her 5-year-old sister will eat. I know I have no right to tell you this, about the woman who opened her home to strangers and so became my father's friend, a spitfire with a golden giggle who loved the rosary, her sons, Freddie Mercury on the radio. No, I have no right, just want. Within war's endless cycle of wreckage and wall, I want a monument to this woman, to her hunger, to her haste, her hands in haste settling soft as snow, a blanket over her father. In my father's house, safe in a plastic case, there's a piece of wall, small enough to hold in one clenched fist, almost small enough to swallow. Lean, if you couldn't tell from that poem, was in the Dutch Resistance. And she was a hero, although she would not have claimed it. I am going to switch back now, as promised, to more poems about my son. And this one is called My Son is a Quantum Particle. It's from this chapbook called Dearling, which my sister Claire made the cover of this chapbook. She is extremely talented. My son is a quantum particle. Why do women like to clean their sons' faces with their spit? He asks. He leans kitchen-wise, trying to smell the lentils simmering last of winter, while I demustard his cheek. Yesterday, when he was shorter, he told me a horse trampled Pierre Curie's skull. Just an accident, but Marie Curie was crushed. I picture a foal reach for deer or lion, something about birth or safety, but he's in motion, his stride a gallop. I want to call after him. I want to lie or tell him only part of the truth. Because you won't wait for the water to run hot for me to find a cloth. Never mind my own rush or that this fleeting intimacy makes me feel like a mother to a smaller child. I realize the swipe of my thumb is just proximity's blow against uncertainty, deflected. Only his position's detectable, not his momentum. How swiftly and at what angle he's racing away from the table, blazing away from me. But if some stealthy power gave me to know his speed, I might miss his limbs spilling over the bed, still in sleep as snow mothering a dirt road, hollowed of hoofbeats. Yes, that knowing would stalk me, so I don't answer, don't speak. I let him go. My own half-life spins, unseen. And before I read this poem, I should note on Horatio's behalf that this poem was written when he was, I think, approaching his 8th birthday, and he is now a very grown-up 12. My son says that on his birthday, he will get up early to be awake at the exact moment he was born, because there could be a time warp. And of course, he would step through it. The tremulous bubble or ring of light or the mist obscuring his curated display of stuffed bunnies and bears, the print of a sailboat racing from harbor. Even though he is afraid of attic robbers scuttling, afraid of spiders and the prospect of falling in love, fearless, he would slip back into the seconds before we knew his name or his face or his heart's glissando trill against our skin, before we knew not to panic or how to hide it. He would smell antiseptic and sweat and blood, overhear the frantic monitors and the nurse's count of sponges, cheerily, with every confidence of his safe return to this house, where the irises again forgot to bloom, where this careless summer he will fall asleep one afternoon in my arms for the last time, probably. When you were born, I was cut open, I say. I know. Then I could see your heart. He truly did say all those things. All right, here's the last one of that kind of poem, which I also don't think I have read out loud to other humans. This poem is called Small Situations, and there's a spoiler alert for Star Trek: The Next Generation. If you haven't seen season 5, you should close your ears for the next 1 minute, 45 seconds. Though the documentary had already moved on to how the timing could have been otherwise, life not arriving or evolving on Earth until some remote future, just before our sun goes nova to mark the birth of God on someone else's planet, I was still stuck on Titan's methane oceans, mulling over permafrost sinkholes when you said, test driving preteen hyperbole. If I think about the size of the universe, it makes me want to hurl. Not your most charming pronouncement, but hazarding that the fuel left in the tank for these, my son says, poems rapidly dwindles, I would have stolen your line anyway, even if you hadn't repeated it later that night, half strangling your floppy-headed IKEA bear and adding, I like small things, small situations. Me too. Small situations, preferably one at a time. The situation of the overgrown forsythia, the situation of the closed barbershop, the situation of the exploding seltzer, the situation of why you have zero interest in Star Trek: The Next Generation, so I can't show you the inner light in which Picard, selected by chance, lives a different lifetime, becomes a friend to gentle-eyed Bataille, and a scientist, and a husband, and a father, and also learns to play the flute, a skill Picard remembers when he, now the memory vessel of an extinct civilization born too late to save itself from burning, is restored to the future, to his other life, his real life. The situation of Picard's flute, the situation of your real life, the situation of the size of the universe. And now I'm going to, as promised, bring us to the cemetery. And I've been an artist in residence at Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge and Watertown for almost the full year now. I'm racing through the last poems, trying to write them before the time is up, although it's not really up. And it's been a lovely experience. And if anybody ever wants to go for a walk, you should let me know. It's a wonderful place. It's very beautiful. Lisa, yes, please, let's go, especially for gardeners, because it's, it's not just a cemetery, it's also an arboretum and a botanical garden. And I could write an advertisement for them. This poem is called Your Average Bear. I used to say, when asked why I'd want to write poems about a cemetery, maybe I think about death more than your average bear. An answer both flippant and wildly presumptuous, given that I have never studied the ontological beliefs of bears, nor surveyed their contemplative practices, let alone charted the frequency with which bears exhibit metaphysical concern. Nor would I be keen to specify what I mean by average in this or any other context. What I should have said. I think about death more than might be supposed by the pitch of my voice, by the spring in my step, by my various profligacies and profanations, intractable. Better yet, I think about death more than the alternate versions of myself across potential universes think about death, though in those universes too, I lumber along trails trodden by wiser forebears, seeking sweetness and fattening for winter, which, scientists say, probably will come again, and whose storms, experience indicates, will, without provocation or remorse, buckle the soundest den. And you have all been a very lovely audience. Thank you so much. And the last poem I'll read is for my friend Bobby. And I haven't figured out how to title it yet, so I'm just going to read it. Dear friend, this morning, as goldfinches tussle through thin-leaf sunflowers, just inside the gates, and seed pods float by, lazy rivulets of light, as flowers and the husks of flowers flop across the footpaths like 40 starlets swooning on settees, as further in, a winged hourglass presides with the Ouroboros over burrows revealed by waterfalling grasses. I wish we could ramble the cemetery together, forgiving the clamor construction makes in overtaking cricket din, because today, this morning, necessity's work goes on, for builders, for biologists and artists, for preservationists and ministers, for gravediggers and gardeners, for guides, for crows and bees, for the mistflower nebula purpling the monument of a merciful man, for the tall blunt birch giving up its green. I think of your inclination toward honesty. I meant to visit Willow Pond today, but I am tired, a little sick, lightheaded, difficult to get lost in the right direction. Still, nubbly fruit of the Coosa dogwood, still, puffy white asters and coiled ferns, still, fragrant sumac's lemon kiss. If you were here, my friend, we could stop for the 2-century oak I've wanted you to meet. I'd like to breathe in its shade with you and talk some quiet talk about your seeking. 2 women in overalls hop out of a golf cart. Their laughter is the northern blazing star that pinks and softens a hillside's stark inclination. Alone this morning and dazzled, I come to rest under a dense hedge of you, the tree of death. But from this shelter, from the graves bedecked with September's genial untidiness, no menace emanates, only a sense of comfort, consolation in which ending takes its part. Maybe you perceive it too, dear friend, in the beauty, the profuse beauty, the abundance of what's nearly spent, still giving. Thank you.
Sorry, it took me a little bit to unmute. Thank you, Carolyn. That was just amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
like funny, moving, brilliant. Um, thank you.
Full of nature.
Yes.
Just love your description of nature. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I am a lifelong indoor girl.
Couldn't tell. I think at this point, I would like to open up the floor to questions. If you raise your hand, I will ask you to unmute. Maria Antonia, would you like to ask a question?
I don't have a question, but
Oh, okay.
I do have a comment.
Yeah.
That was profoundly moving. I could picture where you described, and you brought me smiles and tears. Thank you.
Thank you. That is incredibly kind. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have a question?
I do.
Okay, Karen, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. They were all lovely, lovely poems. I wonder, what does your son think of being the subject of many of your works?
That's a great
Let's put it
question.
this way. Now, when he says something that he knows is funny, he will just look up at me. He won't be looking up at me for long. And he says, "You're going to put this in a poem, aren't you?"
You're so right.
I sure am.
You're
If not now,
right.
later.
Yeah, he knows his mother. Wonderful.
But I think that, as I said in one of those last poems, I think that the time for this is probably running out.
Yeah.
I think that as he approaches teenagerhood, I suspect this will be.
So how old is he now?
He's 12.
12.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. You're getting to
Yeah.
that age. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. Anyone else? Oh, Emily?
Hi, it's nice to meet you. I'm currently studying poetry, and so you read from a lot of different poetry collections that you have, which I thought were really cool from like a wide range of years. And I was just wondering how you think your poetry has evolved from like when you first started writing to like your first collection until your most recent one that's come out, or you have one coming out, I think.
Mhm. She does.
Thank you. That's a really interesting question, which I don't think I've actually ever gotten before. I think the poems in the collection that's coming out in October are really strange. They are very weird. In fact, I would characterize them as poems and poem-like objects. So I think I've gotten more comfortable with weird as time has gone on. I don't know if they've gotten better, but definitely weirder. And oddly enough, I think maybe that's made a little bit more space for feeling a little bit more comfortable with quieter kinds of poems. And I don't know if I don't have a particular style. I don't think I tend to bounce around. I think, as I said, like this is like a smorgasbord, but this is actually what the inside of my brain is kind of like. Oh, flower. I was explaining just has everybody seen the movie Up? You know, the Disney movie with the balls and stuff. You know, there's the dog where it goes, squirrel. So it's like, oh, you showed me a pretty flower or a seashell or like a cemetery grave. So I am very interested. Tell me more about space. I would like so. I think I maybe over time have just sort of accepted that a little more.
That's a great question, Emily. Thank you. Anyone else? I have a question, kind of related to Emily's. So how old were you when you first started writing poetry?
That is also a tricky question. So the first poem I remember writing was a school assignment in, I think, 6th grade, where we went to a Renaissance fair, and we had to write a sonnet. So I remember writing a sonnet about Queen Elizabeth in relation to the Renaissance fair. I don't remember what was in the sonnet. And I don't know where it is. I don't know if it still exists.
Yeah.
And then I wrote poems in high school, which I will not be showing anybody. And I stopped writing for a long time. Oh, they were so self-serious. It was really, they're I'm sure extremely funny, unintentionally funny. And I stopped writing for a long time, and I didn't start writing poems again until probably a little less than 10 years ago, maybe.
Mhm.
I think that's right.
Mhm. Wow. Thank you. Let's see. See one more message.
Oh, there's a question in the chat.
Yeah. Question is, are you going to write more historical type poems or poems in a historical setting?
Well, yes, because I'm writing cemetery poems. And Mount Auburn was founded in 1831, for those of you who haven't been there,
Yep.
America's first garden rural cemetery. So yes, I am writing some not as many historical poems as I expected based on that, except for one, which is still being shaped. I don't know. I suppose I probably will, because eventually I write about everything that interests me. It takes a long time because there's a lot of things. There's a lot of squirrels to chase.
So many squirrels.
So many.
Yeah. So so as the artist or an artist in residence at Mount Auburn, how often do you go? Like, are you like, I think I saw on your website that you were teaching a class on epistolary or letter poems. Can you talk a little bit maybe more about that too?
I would love to. I would love to. So I live about a little over an hour away from the cemetery, which has made it, unfortunately, a little bit more difficult to get there than I would like. So I try to go to the cemetery at least once a month during the residency, although it's actually worked out to being more than that. But I mean, I could live there, although not really, because there's no place to live there. Although the people who are buried there are called, in the terminology of the cemetery, residents.
Right.
Makes artists and residents a whole new thing. That has been wonderful. So yes, I am teaching. I'm teaching a workshop on writing letter poems on March 16th, I think. And then for the end of my project, we're going to do a roaming reading. So I'm going to we're going to walk around the cemetery, and we'll stop at a few places, and I'll read a few poems where that inspired whatever that particular poem is in the cemetery. This is, of course, if the weather cooperates. It'll be April in Boston.
Yes.
It could snow.
Right.
In which case we will hang out in the very beautiful Bigelow Chapel and read the poems there, but hopefully we'll be taking a very mellow walk and reading poems outside. It's been a lovely experience. It's such a nice place to be. So beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much to write about. I went in thinking I was going to write this long polyphonic poem that would, just encapsulate. No, it didn't work at all. So poking around, reading.
Yeah.
I mean, every time I go, I think I'm going to end up in one particular spot, and I end up getting lost somewhere completely different and writing down pages and pages of notes. You could spend a lifetime writing poems just about the cemetery, because it's not just burials. There's also the various plants and trees and flowers and animals.
Birds.
It's crazy. It's wild.
Yeah.
Yes, there are many birds and birders.
Yes.
Saw a big heron last week.
Wow. Little herons. Does anyone else have any questions?
Oh, there's one in the chat.
Let's
Tom
see.
Bat says, do you find teaching inspires your poetry or deadens it? Okay, be honest.
Thanks, Tom.
I think it inspires it. I love students. I love hanging out, and I've never taught poetry on a regular basis, like every day, or a semester long course. I tend to teach shorter workshops, like a day or a weekend. And those are fun because people have such interesting interpretations. I just did an ekphrastic workshop where I put up a piece, and I didn't tell anybody who had painted the painting. I just put it up on the big projector, and it was sort of an abstract piece. And I said, all right, everybody, we just have to look at this for 1 minute. No notes, don't do anything else. It's very hard actually to stare at something for 1 minute, it turns out, in our, attention age. So, and then I said, just tell me what you see, and there's no wrong answers. And it's fascinating, the different things I had looked at this painting, I don't know, for probably 20 straight minutes at various points. And the students found so many different things that I would not have seen, and made different connections, and made different associative leaps. It's delightful. It was The Realm of Appearances by Matthew Wong, if you want to look it up.
Oh,
really
I do want to look that up.
It's at the MFA. That's how I found it.
Oh, okay. Wow. Thanks.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. Do you find yourself in more the historical area of the cemetery, or in some of the more recent burials that tend to interest you, or is that just not an issue?
Well, because everything's so interspersed, except for I'd say one section of the cemetery, which is really more modern. I mean, there's no it's not segregated by date the way a lot of cemeteries are. Or by, it's also not segregated by religion or race or anything else, which is really nice. You could have a plot somewhere and then say, oh, my friend is over there, can I be over there? You don't have to even be with your own family or people from your own town.
Wow.
So it's because everything's sort of mixed up, I just sort of tend to wander. And all the burials are around at least one really interesting natural feature or created natural feature. There are various water features in the cemetery that were built into the landscape. So everything, I'm interested in pretty much everything.
Yep.
And you never know what tributes people will leave on the graves too. Cool tributes. And sometimes the more modern graves have more. And there's some really interesting wording too.
Wow. Thanks, Karen. Does anyone else have a question? Okay, well, I think, do people want to take like a quick 5-minute break and then come back for open mic? I saw one, I think Karen, I think I saw you in the chat as wanting to read. Does anyone else, if anyone else wants to read, just let me know in the chat, or I'll ask again, after Karen reads. So, okay, so let's take I have 7:21, come back by 7:26 and we'll start again. And I'll just be hanging out here. So.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you for all the nice questions. That was so nice.
Yeah.
Lisa, thank you for hosting and moderating. You are an excellent moderator.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say, thanks for bearing with me. This is my first ever moderation of a group this big.
You did so wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I have to get comfortable with the pauses, I think.
Silence is scary.
Yeah. But
Lisa, you're doing a great job.
oh, thanks, Karen. Yeah, it's just I think I have a hard time multitasking, like checking out the chat and like,
Exactly. There's so much to look for.
yeah. So I really appreciate everyone's patience.
And then
Um,
you still want to listen, so you don't want to miss
yes,
it either.
I know. I know.
Thank
Yep.
you, Carolyn. It was just lovely.
Yeah.
You
It
did some
really
really
That's so kind.
wonderful work.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm so happy to get to read. And also I don't think my dad is on the Zoom anymore, but my dad pointed out, my dad's been doing some genealogical research, and he found out that one of our ancestors was one of the founders of Amesbury.
Oh my
No
God.
way. No. Okay, we're
It's
gonna
like
have
the
to
smallest
talk.
of small world things.
We are going to have to talk, maybe at the cemetery.
Yes.
We should all
Yes.
go
I would
sometime
Field
and have a
trip.
tour with you. I'd love to
Oh,
have
I
a
would
tour
love
with you.
that.
That would be
Seriously,
wonderful.
it's one of my favorite places, and this is key, and I will say this to all of you here. The cemetery has bathrooms. Not all cemeteries have bathrooms. This one does, and they're really nice.
That is crucial.
Wonderful.
I think it's very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I measure trips in bladder lengths.
Uh, are- The Watertown is the cemetery in more than one town?
Yes, it's on it. Part of it, it's all one cemetery, but
Right.
there's an invisible border running through it. So part of it's in Watertown and part of it's in Cambridge.
Oh,
So
okay.
usually it's described as being in Cambridge. I think maybe the mailing address is Cambridge, but really it is both in Watertown and Cambridge.
Yeah,
And if
because
you're
I have,
there, there's
yeah.
another cemetery down the street, like a much smaller cemetery on Mount Auburn Street. That's definitely in Watertown. That is also a very old cemetery. It's actually predates Mount Auburn. And
Oh,
there
wow.
are some really interesting graves in there too. There's one of my favorite graves for a friend. There's some really cool names like Tryphosa and Tryphosa. Rosa
Oh,
Water.
wow.
There's an Abraham and Mary Lincoln, not obviously the
Oh
Abraham and
my
Mary Lincoln,
goodness.
but weird, right? And it's got
Yeah.
these really interesting
Oh,
high hill tombs. It's just it's a real little one, so you can sort of walk around the whole thing in probably 10 minutes. Very
Wow.
simple. Whereas Mount Auburn is much bigger.
Does it have a name?
I don't know if it does have a name. For me, it was just the cemetery. I used to live in Watertown, and I lived on Mount Auburn Street, so I could walk down the cemetery with Horatio in his stroller,
Yep.
and it was quiet. It was nice to walk around.
Well, a good friend of mine, his mother and he live in Watertown across from the cemetery. And it's Max Shore. He's the executive director of the Robert Frost Foundation.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh yeah, yep. And
Well, he's
I'm involved in that too. I'm the treasurer. But
oh, wonderful.
it's a lovely place to live because you have very quiet neighbors.
Neighbors are very quiet.
the quietest.
Yeah.
The most quiet neighbors, unless they're like the Fisher cats get in there, they're very loud. And the
Oh.
Oh well, they own the place.
you
Mhm.
Do
know.
they let you drive in and park?
Oh yeah, you can definitely park. You just park on any street that doesn't have a green line on it.
Oh, okay.
And all the paths are named after flowers. It's really, really nice. Except there's one path that's called Story Path.
Wow.
And I think actually now I'm thinking about it, in the modern section, there's a couple paths that are named after minerals. Now
Hmm.
that I'm thinking about it. I've spent a
Wow.
lot of time in cemetery. It is spectacular in spring and really good in the summer too.
Oh yes, it's
It's
gonna
all-
be gorgeous in spring.
It's
Mm.
really, I can't wait. I'm excited to be there in April. All the flowers come up.
Do you know when your reading is in April? I guess
Yes, April 20, I think it's April. Is it Shakespeare's birthday? I don't think it's Shakespeare's birthday. Hang on one second. Let me just,
sorry.
no, I'm gonna look at my calendar because I've been thinking about the workshop in March. It's April 13th.
Okay.
That is the one, that's the one I'm at. And there are lots of other programs going on too. They have, it's not just one artist in residence. I think there are 6 or maybe even 7 of us this year. So
Wow. Wow.
somehow I'm the first poet they've had, but this year there's a painter as well, a photographer. A woman named Eden there was an organ that like a musical instrument organ
Yeah.
that was taken down for I can't remember for what reason. And Eden has built a series of new instruments out of the organ and written new music for them, which is
Wow.
so
Wow.
cool. So Eden's doing public presentations. There's a mother and daughter theater team who are doing some sort of installation. There's a dancer, lots of programs going on. The painter Risa Blattman, who actually has some paintings of bats up in the Peabody Essex, if you've seen that.
Oh,
One of hers is, I have to get up there because I love bats. She's done the series of moss paintings, which are stunning. They're gorgeous. They're going
wow.
up, I think, March 23rd. So I'll be there for that because I wrote an ekphrastic poem about one of them.
Oh, cool.
I'm
That
gonna
is
be
so cool.
the 23rd, but she's going to be there for 2 days to like talk about them and just be around while they're out. Yeah, they're beautiful. They're so cool.
Wow. So does Mount Auburn Cemetery have like a website where they post like events like that, especially related to artists and residents?
It's the Friends of Mount Auburn is I think the technical term for the 501(c)(3).
Yes.
They're the organization, and they have like an email newsletter. They're on Instagram. I think they're on Facebook, but I find Facebook's interface so overwhelming that I'm never on there. I want to go on, but then I see it, I'm like, and I run away.
Seems like it's gotten even more overwhelming over time
Yeah, I think
for
it
some
has.
reason.
It feels, yeah. But
Yeah.
it's great. Like I said, total cemetery fangirl. Loved. And also we have good cemeteries out here in Worcester, I should also mention. We have a rural cemetery that was modeled on Mount Auburn. It's also really pretty and green, nice trees, doesn't have as much signage. Mount Auburn's trees are all labeled. They have the name and they have the accession date and where it came from, what the origin is, all that stuff. That's really
Wow.
fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you think you'll be in residence as an artist? To phrase that carefully.
I was telling Ken, I was telling my husband, I was kicking myself because there's a small honorarium that comes around with the position. It's like, I'm a dope. I should have asked them for like a bigger space instead. But I didn't think of it.
Oh.
Would have been nice. Anyway, I'm talking everybody's ears off about
No, you're not. You're not. I'm so here for this, and I think I'm not alone.
You would love it because if you don't know, Lisa is an amazing gardener, and there are flowers galore. Like
Aw.
so many beautiful flowers. Oh my gosh.
You'll have to come up and see it sometime. And we have Lori Douglas who's on, and she and I are both part of a native plant gardening group in Amesbury.
Oh my gosh. So
So
they're trying to incorporate more native plants too. I mean, it does have
Mhm.
plenty of non-native species as well, but I
Right.
think they are trying to do that.
Yeah,
Oh, so
Yeah.
cool.
cool.
Come to my house and teach me things.
Okay. All right, and you come over too, everybody.
My sad gardening, Lisa, I think you'll be proud of me. I planted yarrow and I have
Hey.
I grow everything from like seed, and I have these microscopically small, 3 microscopically small seedlings. I'm like,
They take time. Might take a couple seasons.
yeah.
I'm thinking that we should begin the reading part, the open mic part, for those who volunteered. I have Karen and Carla. And if anybody else wants to read, that's great. I guess I wonder if I should read too. Where did I put my book? But I'll go
Obviously, you should
last. I'll go last. So Karen, would you like to?
Sure. I'm ready.
Awesome.
I have a poem from Anne Bradstreet.
Oh, okay.
And I have to say, I wish Chris Bryant hadn't left because I wanted to say hello to her.
Oh,
Nancy Weir and Sally Lavery,
mhm.
two of my dearest friends, and Nancy was the person who brought me to Anne Bradstreet. I never knew her. When you asked Carolyn when she started to write poetry, I didn't start to write it until 1995
Wow.
because, well, I remember one poem. Remember, you said you had a middle school poem and then a high school poem. I had a sophomore year of high school, and it was one that I like 5 lines or 6 lines long. I don't remember how long it was, but it was very short. And it was the only one I remember that I
Hmm.
ever really did until 1995. And Sally Lavery was the cousin of Nancy Weir. They both passed. Sally died last
Mm.
year, and Nancy died, I believe, in 1994. No, I'm sorry, no. 2017. I'm thinking wrong totally. But
Mm.
they were dear friends, both very dedicated to the Friends of John Greenleaf Whittier.
Mm.
Very dedicated.
Mhm.
And Nancy put out a beautiful little book that's available at the North Andover Library and the Ipswich Library, Anne Bradstreet selections from her works. And it's a delightful little book. You can put it in your pocket. It's like a poem in your pocket kind of thing.
Mm.
But this is the first one the favorite one for me. I haven't found anything that is more of my favorite of any poem. To my dear children, this book by any yet unread, I leave for you when I am dead, that being gone, here you may find what was your living mother's mind. Make use of what I leave in love, and God shall bless you from above. It covers everything for me. It
Mm.
covers children, it covers vocation, it just, and it's so simple and so
Mm.
deep.
Yeah.
I use it when I teach children because there's a missing preposition in line 4. Make use, and I'm sorry, what was your living mother's mind, not what was in your living mother's
Mm. Mhm.
completely different meaning. And
Mhm.
4th graders from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania remembered that 2 weeks later after I came back after we had the first class, and they remembered the word that was missing and how it made a difference.
Wow.
It
That's
was so much
incredible.
fun. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. Carla, would you like to read?
Sure, sure. I guess I'll just read. Since you were mentioning invasives, I have a poem that is in one of my books. The book is Intimacy with the Wind, and the name of this poem is called The Sad Ballad of the Garlic Mustard. And it was inspired in part by a Ballad of the Sad Cafe by Carson McCullers too. So I mentioned the characters in that novella, which are Miss Amelia and Cousin Lyman. And so this is called The Sad Ballad of the Garlic Mustard. I must have identified more with Miss Amelia and her hard ways turned soft by love than with Cousin Lyman. I felt uncomfortable about Lyman. He popped up like the garlic mustard that emerged in my side yard this April. Not entirely unwelcome, the punchy green heart-shaped leaves bouquets brides might throw to hopeful singles. The roots are tender, white, and radishy. I intended to jettison them, but then read you can cook them. I would have to soak the roots to remove the mud. Miss Amelia might have used the leaves in a beer. She would bring pitchers out and pour glasses all around while Lyman stayed on. I could open a pop-up cafe with all this mustard, sauteed in eggs, a mustard pesto, roots cooked into sauce. Then I read the young ones have more cyanide than the second years do. Bad things can go good. I stare out at all the mustard, bags full in my future. I wonder if I can tackle all this alone, if I might one day come to love my yard, if sauteing and invasive is sweet revenge. Thank you.
Oh, nice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for reading it. I was just thinking, oh, you could come over to my house.
I'm done with mustard.
Put up some mustard. It kind of reminded me of a poem that I could read. Let's see. Oh, no, that's not it. I have one about prickly lettuce. Here we go. So it's called Let Us Consider the Prickly Lettuce. Let us consider the prickly lettuce, Latuca cereola, and how anyone ever thought to eat it. Let us consider leaves with teeth and teeth like needles, leaves splayed compass-wise around the stem. Let us consider using gloves to pluck the young leaves for salad. They grow bitter as they age, as they flower. Let us consider this wild, feeble opium. When cut, it bleeds milk, good for calming fevers, upsets, spasms. When used in excess, it can stop the heart. Let us consider the descendants, toothless and smooth on the tongue. Romaine, Butterhead's bib and Boston, Crisphead, including iceberg, Oakleaf, Little Gem. Let us remember the adjacents and imposters, bitter and frilly, arugula, radicchio, escarole, mesclun. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much for being here and persisting through to the end. I really appreciate that.